This is the WP Elevation Podcast, helping WordPress consultants elevate.
Hey everybody, welcome to WP Think Tank number 3, and just like that, we're up and about. I'm just going to make sure this the actual YouTube video stream is working on the WPThinkTank.com website, because I had all sorts of problems this morning starting a Google Hangout on air. Google keep making it harder and harder to use their products. Anyway, that's a whole other conversation. So hopefully the video will be streaming very soon on the live website. Today on the panel, hey, Matt Medeiros has just walked into the room. Hey Matt, how you doing?
Hey, what's up?
Excellent, excellent. We have Tom Wilmot from Human Made. We have Shane Pellman from Modern Tribe. We have Miriam Schwab from Luminea. We have Matt Medeiros from the Matt Report. There we go, look at that. Beautiful, just turn myself off there. And we have Alex King from Crowd Favorite and Scott Basgard from Human Made. I think he's on dad duty at the moment, and I gave him extremely late notice, so he probably won't be joining us. And I think Jake Goldman is off inventing rockets for NASA, and he can't join us either. So it looks like it might be a smaller crew today, but nonetheless, we're going to knock it out of the park. So, WP Think Tank, what is this all about and why are we here? Well, we're here because, for those that don't know, I host a podcast, and so does Matt Medeiros at the Matt Report. We host podcasts, and I kind of had this moment where I'd get to the end of a podcast and I'd hit stop on the Skype. I'd hit stop record on Skype, and then the conversation would just keep going for ages. And I thought, hang on, I think there's some hunger for sort of more long-form conversation about things where we're not really restrained by the time constraints of a podcast. So I just put an email out to a few buddies and said, hey, I want to do this kind of think tank panel discussion about the future of WordPress and the challenges and the opportunities that it poses. Who wants to join in? And I was very fortunate that a bunch of people who are far more intelligent and interesting than me said yes, they'd come and join me. So here we are. This is number 3, and let's hope that we don't suffer third album syndrome and go down in a ball of flames. The first time we crashed Rackspace's server, which was excellent. The second time, Matt Mullenweg kindly put us on WordPress VIP. So we're on rock-solid servers now, and we should be good. There are currently 50 people in the chat widget already, so that's good to see. I think last time we had about 400. Let's see if we can beat that. Okay. The topics that we're going to be looking at today, again, I put this out to our audience and to our panelists, and there are some interesting topics that we're going to be talking about. And before we get into the topics, I'm just going to give each panelist sort of 30 seconds to say who they are, where they're from, and what they're doing here, and what they have to do with WordPress, or if they're just lost and they've found their way into the room. Let's start with Alex King from Crowd Favorite.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alex King. I founded what is now the Denver office of Crowd Favorite since our merger earlier this year. Developer, designer, and friends with a lot of these folks, and looking forward to talking more with some of the folks I don't know quite as well.
Cool. The Denver office of Crowd Favorite, is that what it's no longer founder of Crowd Favorite, you're founder of the Denver office of Crowd Favorite, hey? There are big things on the horizon, aren't there?
Yeah, when you start bringing all these companies together, everybody has to start taking founder off their title. Otherwise, it's a little awkward.
Excellent. Matt Medeiros, who are you, what are you doing, where are you from, and why are you here?
Sure thing. I have no idea why I'm here, but I run a podcast called Matt Report. I run a services agency called Slocum Studio, and we just recently got into the crazy game, like a lot of the folks on this panel, of launching our first commercial plugin. So it's been really fun, turbulent ride the last few weeks.
Awesome. Miriam Schwab from Luminea, how are you doing, why are you here, and what are you up to?
Well, I'm here because thank you for inviting me, and I like to talk about WordPress when I can, and I manage a company in Jerusalem, Israel called Luminea, and we design and develop WordPress sites and plugins and application-type sites for our clients in Israel and around the world. That's it.
You're so humble, Miriam. You're also one of the organisers of about 84 WordCamps across Europe.
Right, I forgot about that. Not exactly.
Your output and productivity is beyond most human beings. Shane Pellman from Modern Tribe, for those of you that don't know, who are you, why are you here, what are you up to, what do you do?
Sure, hi folks. My name's Shane Perlman. I'm one of the partners at Modern Tribe. We're kind of a freelance collective digital agency working on a lot of projects for large brands, everybody from Microsoft to eBay. We also have a line of commercial WordPress plugins, the events calendar. Actually, we just hit our millionth download.
Woohoo!
The last few weeks, so broke 1 million, stoked. And we also do a lot of talking and thinking about the freelance lifestyle.
That's awesome. Without pumping your tires up too much, Shane was out in Australia recently. We hung out and had dinner, and I was saying to him, when I started freelancing, he was one of the first people I started following because I was just blown away at like the amount of free stuff you were giving away about being a freelancer. I was like, dude, and it was kind of like my introduction to the WordPress open source kind of philosophy. It's like everyone was so sharing, and I kind of locked onto you when you first started out. So thank you, Shane, for publishing all that useful information and having an impact on my life.
Yeah,
Tom,
if you guys will go to freelance.tri.be, we share a lot of free resources just for that.
Cool. Freelance.tri.be. I'll try and stick a link to that stuff in the show notes after the recording. Tom Wilmot from Human Made, who is systematically trying to employ as many people as crowd favorite and 10 up. Tom, what are you?
That's impossible.
Who are you? What are you doing? What are you up to, and why are you here?
So, and I guess I run Human Made, which is a, like everyone else here, is a client services and WordPress product company. We're about 15 people now, spread out all over the world. I'm here because, I've got a huge vested interest in the future of WordPress, but also it's my passion as well. I'm really interested in the future of WordPress and in being part of that future. So it's like a huge privilege and pretty exciting to be able to talk about it with, such a all-star cast. Yeah, that's me.
An all-star cast. Excellent. For those that don't know, my name is Troy Dean. I'm from Video User Manuals and WP Elevation. We essentially try and help WordPress freelancers and consultants run a better business and give them the tools to do that. And we also do a bit of client services, and very excited to announce that the new QuickBooks blog is now launched and live, and we developed that, and we're very proud of it. It's one of our largest international clients that we've landed, so that was fun and games. And I'm the host of WP Think Tank just because, I didn't have enough on my plate and I thought I'd put something else together because I'm a little bit crazy. Okay, so some of the things that we're going to be talking about today, if you remember last episode, we spoke a lot about enterprise solutions for WordPress. So Tom Wilmot floated, I'm just going to give you an overview of some of the things we're going to talk about, and then we're going to go deep. Tom Wilmot floated the idea of, instead of last episode we spoke a lot about enterprise. This episode talk about the future of the long tail in WordPress is about end-to-end experiences. So that is centrally hosted end-to-end business solutions based on WordPress. Something like Obox Instant, for example. Happy Tables is an example of this. Think of a hosted WooCommerce solution, so where you don't have to install WordPress and install a bunch of plugins and themes and get something up and running. You literally just push a button and a solution pops out of the box. We're going to be talking about that. We are going to be talking about training resources, even though Jake Goldman's not on the call. He did want to talk about training resources. Obviously, it's something I'm very passionate about with the Video User Manuals plugin, so we will touch on that. And also we're going to talk about how the race to the bottom on pricing benefits platforms, not developers. Alex King wrote an interesting article about this recently, which got a bit of engagement, for want of a better, cleaner word, and we're going to be talking about that in detail as well. And we're also going to be taking your questions, so if you are on wpthinktank.com, feel free to join in the conversation in the chat widget, ask some questions, and we will try and get to them as we can. So why don't we start with this race to the bottom benefits platforms, not developers. Alex, do you want to give us a brief overview of what you mean when you say that?
Sure, yeah, it came up recently quite a bit in the iOS development community. A lot of independent developers lamenting the fact that they have a hard time making a good salary selling apps in the iOS App Store. And this all came about before the iPhone. Software prices were 3 to 4 times what they seem to average now, and iPhone apps came out and they were just a few bucks each, and kind of drove the pricing pressure on everybody down, so to the point where most apps now that are launching are free with various in-app purchases to unlock them. Developers have traditionally lamented the lack of trials, which would then allow people to, be more comfortable paying higher prices, etc. And these folks talked about this for quite a while, and it made me think a lot about the WordPress community because the WordPress open source project has always put a lot of resources behind making freely available solutions available to everyone, helping publicize them, things like that. But it's been sort of an uphill battle to create commercial products for the WordPress platform. And when you zoom back and look at this, you see that the more free stuff that's out there, the more people can do without having to pay for commercial products, the better it is for the platform and for the users of that platform. It's not necessarily better for the developers. And there are a bunch of arguments to be made about how commercial products in the long term typically offer a better experience for their customers because they have actual support behind them and things like that. But it's also true that there are lots of alternative monetization options out there that have come out. There's been the various subscription models. There's the take a bunch of VC money, offer everything for free, and hope that you can make ends meet some point in the future model. But all of these things have taught consumers that they can expect a whole lot of stuff for free. And so people that are trying to stick with kind of the traditional, I'm going to charge you X for Y product, they're finding that that model is a lot more difficult to succeed with than it was, say, 5 or 10 years ago.
Alex, let us know when we can disagree with you.
I'm open it up.
All right.
All right, the gloves are on early.
No, there's nothing wrong with what he's saying. I think it's just a lot of nuance to it. So, first of all, you're right. The more proliferation of, and I'm going to say good free content, because you put a ton of free garbage out there, all you do is piss off your users and people hop platforms. So it's not just like, oh, look, WordPress has the most plugins in the world. That doesn't actually mean anything if people try 10 in a row and go like, none of this stuff works. So I think there's truth. But also, like, I remember, I think I was actually sitting next to you, 2010 WordCamp SF. I don't remember. The guy who wrote The Year Without Pants, Scott something, I don't remember his last name.
Scott Birkin.
Birkin. He got up on stage and he said, I have a problem and I need you to fix it. I make money off my website. And for years, I never touched it. I never updated anything. And then I got hacked and I lost a bunch of money. So I went to the community. I went to people and I'm like, I got hacked. What do I do? And everybody said, well, do you update? And he's like, no, why would I do that? And they're like, well, there's your problem. You just need to update and then you won't get hacked and you should be okay. And he's like, so I just started hitting update, update, update until I started running this problem where I was using free plugins and I couldn't, like, half the time I hit update, it would take my site down because some developers working in their garage on their free time making, some good updates and some bad updates. And he's like, no, I'm trapped. I'm trapped because if I don't hit update, I'm going to get hacked or DDoS'd or something horrible is going to happen. I'm going to lose money. But if I do hit update and it's not from somebody I trust, well, they're going to take my site down too. So to me, there's a difference between somebody who's building a site that, losing quality doesn't affect it versus the world of people out there who actually need to make money and depend on quality. And he said it. He said, I would gladly pay for anybody who solves this solution. So to me, like, yeah, you can have a lot of free stuff out there, but if the quality isn't there, a lot of people are willing to pay for quality. It's just got to solve the right problem.
I think the point that the point that I got from Alex's article was that WordPress, I think I mean, my experience was when I first started using WordPress, the plugin repository was like the clouds had parted and heaven had just opened up. It was like this unbelievable playground of stuff that I could use and tinker with and get support from developers. And I can tell you categorically, after speaking to so many people on the podcast, the experience was the reason they stayed using WordPress when they started using it. The reason that they kept using WordPress is because it was the path of least resistance. They could get something up, and the plugin architecture made extending it really easy. And I believe that a lot of developers have come to WordPress and brought a lot of clients to WordPress because of the plugin repository. I think that's been a huge factor in that. So I think the point that Alex is making is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that WordPress has definitely benefited from this, free functionality. But I think the challenge is that developers are still trying to work out how to sustain themselves because of the competition around this functionality, because there is so much stuff amazing available for free, like the events calendar plugin, for example. And I'm not going to pump up your tires, Shane, but I used this the other day on a little website that I'm building for our body corporate committee, and the free version does exactly what I want it to do, and just saved me probably 2 weeks of programming, because I'm a bit of a numpty when it comes to developing, and it would have taken me at least 2 weeks to figure that out, even to start planning it. So I just can't get that solution with any other platform. So WordPress as a platform benefits because of the massive people using it, but I think a lot of developers are still trying to work out how to sustain themselves.
So let me ask you guys, based upon what you just said, Alex. Let me ask you a question. Do you want to go first? Go for it.
Yeah, I want to ask you a question about your plugin, which is, would you have such a robust free solution if the WordPress community did not have such pressure, like if the distribution through the plugin repository was not so valuable?
No, you're totally right. In fact, let me turn this question around and ask you guys. So we're looking at the next iteration of our tickets platform, and we're having a huge internal debate right now, which is, well, we don't have a free version of our ticket stuff right now, but we've been wondering, would we get further traction, a much larger audience, and greater conversions, both economically but as well as quality, if we release a simpler free version on .org and move that portion freemium as well? For exactly the reason you're saying. It's if I had 1 million people using it, testing it, engaging it, giving feedback on it, and then only a small portion of them converting economically, but it's enough as a small portion to make it sustainable for a lifestyle. There's a lot of power of freemium in that way.
And I think also going back to like one of the original premises of Alex's article, which was kind of what we've seen in the iOS community, like that is basically the model that modern successful indie developers are taking. Give away app for free, upsell some kind of more expensive version like via in-app purchase. The only people that really seem to be making money in iOS selling paid up front are like hugely mass market things like games, and even that is like a few people making most of the money.
Yeah, wasn't there I read some statistic that, the 80-20 rule? Well, I read a statistic that 80% of the revenue in the App Store doesn't come from 20% of the developers. It actually comes from 20 development companies doing 80% of the revenue through the iOS App Store.
Yeah, and it's people like EA, PopCap, like the really big game houses mostly. I think there are a couple of caveats to that, though. I think like really niche software you can still sell for a high price, and people are going to pay that price and find it because there aren't free alternatives. I think another big problem we've got in the WordPress like plugin and theme ecosystem that is different to iOS is that we're selling to developers, not to consumers. And developers are savvy. Like, one, they know that they probably know about the free stuff. They probably have got the skills to like take that free stuff and hack it together. So you're fighting an uphill struggle against them to even convince them that what you're selling them is worth anything to them, because they're like, wow, I could build this myself.
Though, Tom, that's changed for us in particular, because we run surveys, and so we try to understand who's buying for the paid users. And over the last year, literally, that shifted. Where 2 years ago, in our surveys, like nearly 70, 80% of people were at least part-time, what we call internally as implementers. I wouldn't call them developers necessarily, but they know enough to, make their brother a website, but there's somebody, they're not doing it for themselves, they're doing it for someone else.
We call them web assemblers. Same people.
And just now, one of the guys on our team started running new reports and running surveys again, and that's changed. Like, we're nearly, I'll look it up later after, but I think it was something like 40 to 45% of people are now self-service, small business owners, church volunteers, a lot of that stuff. And so it's interesting to see as WordPress is reaching larger and larger audiences, people are trying to install and are actively paying for services and support.
So Shane, can I just position that question back to you about your internal debate of going freemium versus paid? If you didn't have the event calendar with 1 million downloads and you were faced with launching the ticket plugin or service today, would that decision be easier for you? In other words, would you look at all the time and investment?
Down.
Okay.
Our debate is we already have this huge freemium community. Is it worth building another? Like, does that actually help, or do we already have all that traffic and therefore we're losing conversions by giving away free things? Well,
so you would go freemium?
Without a doubt. Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt.
What have you done, Matt? I'm sorry, I haven't. I know that you've just launched a plugin. I haven't been across the model of the launch behind it. What's your strategy been?
Yeah, so right now we're just in a paid closed beta, only because we've been doing themes for 2 years and it's been fairly good for us. But knowing what we know from the support side of things, that we weren't going to do all this investment into the plugin, and then because of what the plugin can do, which can work on any theme, we're afraid of that support cost of working on any theme, right? We're not necessarily marketing it in that fashion. We just know that developers and implementers can use it on any theme. So we didn't want to go. We want to build a sustainable software company, and just like I'm planting my feet firmly in the ground, saying I can't go freemium because I just don't know what to expect yet. So I'm just trying to, in the marketing terms, is just fortifying that message and saying, look, we think it's worth an hour of your development time. Like if you charge $125 an hour, we're just saying that this plugin is worth 1 hour of your time, and you might go out and resell what this plugin does for $1,000, for $5,000. We're just asking for 1 hour of your time, and that's sort of what we're planted firmly. And so far, we've only had one person come back and say this is worth $20, not $125. But I don't know if I would go freemium, only because it's, to me, that's just a whole different animal to wrangle. And we do it now with freemium themes. All of our pro themes are free in .org, and we've seen the power of like being in the .org directory and being featured on the homepage of the theme site, the theme page, and that traffic. It's awesome. It's powerful. But it's also something that once you're not there and just battling in that sort of marketplace, for lack of a better term, it's not a decision that I think we want to make right now in going freemium.
Alex, I want to look this. Sorry,
Can I ask
Tom?
Matt a question? So the biggest thing I'd say you're missing out on there isn't necessarily like the ability to sell it to a much bigger market, but like, aren't you missing out a lot on in terms of like the data you would collect from all of the free users, like how they used your plugin, especially given what it does? I would think seeing it used in wild would be hugely interesting.
All the terms on .org, basically, I mean, you can opt in, collect, and in a certain subset.
Even just via support, I think you would collect enough data just from the support requests that came through in terms of how people are running into, right? Like. Right.
So, but I mean, my only fear is, and again, this is why we're still in that closed beta, is we don't, what happens when it is giving away for free and we just can't keep up with either the support demands, because people can build fairly complex sites, right, and do some, pretty complex things with this plugin. I'm afraid that it's just going to take us down a rabbit hole that we won't be able to dig ourselves out of. And what I've seen on .org in many instances is the fact that I don't want to get into this argument, but just like the review system and the rating system is very scary, right? Because the people who will love it are just going to like say, hey, this is awesome, this is great. They're not going to go back and leave a review. It's a typical, like, it's a human thing. It's not a .org thing. It's just people will not leave that review. It's the people who just can't work with it are just going to give me that 1 star and then pound away 4 or 5 paragraphs of why this was terrible. And I'm just...
I have the opposite experience with that, actually. Like
Really?
So we've got a plugin that's got like 1 million+ downloads, and we have a single text link in the footer of the plugin page, and it just says, hey, if this is working for you, rate it on the plugin directory. We've got like 600+ 5-star reviews, a handful of 1-star reviews.
Yeah, I would say there's not a lot of middle ground, though. Like,
no, there's no middle ground.
It's either 5-star or 1-star, and every so often somebody lands in the middle.
So let's take a moment to think about why the review system and why the number of support threads resolved in the last 2 weeks or month or whatever. Why are all of those things exposed, right? It's all to provide pressure on the developers to provide free support and increase the quality of these free plugins and themes, right? It's to improve the platform.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Can I just chime in here for a second? I'm just looking at the. First of all, Matt, I must agree with Tom. We've had a really good experience with the review system. The white label CMS plugin, for those that don't know, just allows you to basically rebrand and white label WordPress admin. That's had, I don't know how many downloads, but a couple of 100,000 downloads. We've got like 4 pages here of really good reviews. A couple of paragraphs. Some of these reviews go on about why the plugin is so great. And in terms of Shane's point, in the back of this plugin, if the video user manuals plugin is not installed, we will show you an opt-in for some free ebooks to teach you how to run a better business as a WordPress developer, and then that goes into an autoresponder sequence which upsells you to the video user manuals plugin, and that is pretty much the only source of leads and sales for the video user manuals plugin. And without the white label CMS free plugin, we wouldn't have a business. That has been the thing that has got 95% of our sales for the video user manuals plugin.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I don't want, and then of course our experience is only from the themes in .org, which upsells and call to actions are a whole heck of a lot more controlled than they are in the plugin side of things, just because of the review process. I'd imagine.
I think the idea with a free plugin is if you can make a free plugin that doesn't have many moving parts, you'll minimize, but add some value, you'll minimize the support load. And if it's kind of the white label CMS free plugin for us was something that we retrofitted to our strategy after we launched video user manuals. My business partner actually said we need a free plugin to get some traction and build an audience, and he came up with the idea for white label CMS. And it doesn't have many moving parts. It's basically just a form. You upload some images, put in some stuff, hit publish, and you're done. And it's a nice fit for our paid plugin. Alex, can I just pose this argument that it's up to that when any market becomes saturated, the cream, there's the saying that the cream rises to the top, or in your case, the kareem rises to the top. Sorry, bad joke. But isn't it up to us to, as developers, to be smart and to work out a way to monetize and to work out a way to sustain ourselves because somebody else just will if we don't?
Yeah, in my post, I say that as a community, a tech community, we make fun of industries who don't adapt and update themselves as things change. Right, the music industry, for example, things like that, newspapers, and I think software developers are in danger of being in that same group. Right? If you're not willing to explore alternative monetization strategies, look at other ways of recouping value out of the things that you build, you're not going to be successful. Like the old approach of this is the price and this is what you get and then here's your support. Like that's a model that's it's on this end of the slope at this point.
Do you really feel that something like SaaS is a viable alternative, or I mean, it just has all of its own problems as well?
I think that every product has its own different complements that have potential monetization options. For something like your events plugin, for example, it might be, partnering with people that run venues or things like that, and taking cuts of the tickets, or there's other ways to pull the value out of software rather than charging a sticker price for it.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, there's affiliate backend stuff, which we've seen a lot of people do. We've got a plugin with Eventbrite where we get a percentage of new ticket sales, where the revenue off the relationship is as valuable as the sales and the ticket itself. And that's because we're solving two problems. We're helping the user, but Eventbrite wants new business.
Yeah, I'm not trying to argue that software is a dying industry. I'm saying that the direct sales to consumer model is a lot harder than it used to be.
Yeah.
Look out of curiosity at what I guess CrowdVelo, what the new organization you guys are building are going to do with the product lines that you have, or is that not something that's been figured out?
Well, I mean, you could look at what we've got now, which is we've got AdSanity, which is still on its own website that the Pixel Jar guys originally built. We've got Ramp and Carrington Build on the crowd favorite website. We've got the announcement today that we're going to be working with iThemes to bring help them create some enterprise products and bring those out, and say that hey, this doesn't seem like one cohesive strategy, and I certainly wouldn't argue with you there.
There's no but.
Drop the mic, walk away.
Hopefully that doesn't appear to be the goal, right? That's the steps along the way, and that's where we are right now.
Well, but because I'll say one of the things that I've always, as a development team, we've always found a lot of value in your products, but a lot of the products that we've, at least the ones that we're really familiar with, were tool sets. With the exception of some of the themes, theme extensions, but even those were very developer-oriented. As opposed to something that was, completely consumer-oriented. Do you think that has something to do with the experiences that you've had?
The fact that we haven't ever had any consumer-oriented plugins? Well, I'm not sure. I understand.
I mean, I'd argue consumer plugins would be even worse, not better. Like the price pressure on consumer stuff is even worse. I think that it's even. I think it's worse than Alex is saying. Really, I don't necessarily think it's that software is that selling software is a dying industry, or I do think it is, but I think that really the problem it goes deeper than that. And I think it is the same as, I think this is the thing that it shares with iOS most closely, which is there was just an unstable gold rush market at the beginning where anybody, there was not really much out there, and anybody could just create an iOS app or create a plugin and throw it out there, and maybe it wasn't that great, maybe they weren't providing support. There was enough demand that people bought it anyway. So you could be kind of mediocre and do an all right job. Whereas now, there only really needs to be one good event plugin because everyone can buy that. And so eventually there will only be one, or maybe two, but there's not going to be 10. And so it just totally cuts out anybody who isn't at the top. And that's happening in iOS, where there's 2 million apps, but there's 1 or 2 in each category that everybody buys.
Yeah,
And I think the
it's
same thing's going to happen in WordPress.
it's the same if you go to Theme Forest or Code Canyon. It's the same. Like there's 90% of the developers on Code Canyon are selling like 5 plugins a week. And not sustaining themselves. So we see this happening, and I think Alex, I think Shane makes a point here. I think we need to differentiate what's business to consumer and what's business to business. We sell a plugin that's aimed at WordPress developers. An end user doesn't get much value out of our plugin because it's $24 a month, right? A developer gets value out of it. So we're in the B2B space. The B2C space is really, really hard. I mean, you go to the Mac App Store and you buy Keynote for your Mac for $20. I mean, if you use that thing, you see how powerful Keynote is for $20. Come on, this is the mentality and the psychology that consumers have when it comes to software. So to spend $50 on an events calendar plugin for WordPress when I can get Keynote for $20, it just doesn't make sense. There's this disconnect. There's a major disconnect there in expectations and what we're asking them to invest. And I think that's a real problem for if you're selling software to consumers.
At the
Miriam,
same time,
Miriam, is your microphone working, Miriam?
Yeah. Can I say something?
Yes.
A lot of fun. Thank you. Tarna, I guess it's a female thing. I'm like, oh, I shouldn't interrupt now, but I'm interrupting. Thank you very much for helping me. So a lot of our clients are part of the tech industry in Israel. So I can talk about the tech industry in general and where it's going. And what a lot of them are starting to do, and particularly with pressure from VCs who at the end of the day want to make money, right, is moving towards B2B rather than B2C in general. Because like you were all saying in one way or another, if a business can see direct value out of what they're spending money on, they spend $50 and they save, even if it makes them $60, right? They've made $10 on that. That's already an ROI that's justifiable. So a consumer, and particularly like a general casual WordPress user, they're not going to spend $50 on a calendar plugin. So that's possibly I don't know if it's wrong, because those people could eventually become the serious WordPress users, and maybe we should look at it as a long-term type of funnel where we want to keep those people engaged for when they become more advanced. But in the meantime, if we're looking to where to target any premium things, software that we're developing, then we need to look to B2C, and in our world, that would be the developers. And I know from my point of view, I am happy to spend money over and over on, let's say, the events calendar plugin or on Gravity Forms, the developer license, because I'm going to start developing a whole events calendar thing. No, that's hours and hours of work. They've done a fantastic job. I'm going to spend whatever it is and give my clients a lot of value, and that $50 maybe X times that. And the same with Gravity Forms. So that makes the potential market smaller, because it's not every one of the millions of WordPress users. It's a serious one. But as long as we can prove the value, and I think that's in everything that we sell, then people will buy it. And also in terms of competition, I mean, that's the nature of any market. Even if you're you get in early, some people will eventually catch up to you, and unless you stay at the top and continuously develop and continuously provide more value, then you will fall. It's like everything. So I don't think there's anything mysterious here or different. It's just business.
Yeah, you're dead on, Miriam. We're in the middle of a market maturation cycle. I mean, you kind of see most markets have a natural cycle. There's an initial period of innovation where actually most people think you're just crazy, and then you start having an initial kind of early adopter phase, and then when it hits about 10% of potential market, usually this huge inflection point. And then for the same amount of time it took you to saturate about 10%, it takes you the same amount of time to hit the next 90. And during that period, what you usually start seeing is a lot of mergers and acquisitions. You're seeing it in the WordPress service space right now. I mean, Crowd Favorite's a great example, but there's a bunch of other ones. I expect you might start seeing it in the plugin space relatively soon, if it's not already happening quietly. We've seen people like these guys out of Minneapolis just bought Jason's theme shop, 57.
WordPress 75 Press.
Yeah, thank you. So that got acquired. You're starting to see these kind of consolidations, which is a normal part of an industry. And then typically there's a domination phase where you're right, a couple of major players really hold down for a while, and then it returns to a disruption phase. So you can even see something like, look, how many people on this call right now are using Slack for team communications?
I was just going to mention that, yeah.
Yeah, look, did Slack do something brilliant? Maybe, but I don't feel like was it really that different than HipChat or Skype or any of the other million solutions that did the same? No, they just did it just right in a way with the right marketing, the right stuff where they were able, or you even just look at Apple versus Microsoft. I mean, they had like 97%, and yet in the last couple of years, what a flop. So that does happen, as like Miriam said, when people don't keep growing, they don't listen to the customers right, or they get too heavy to pivot nimbly.
So there's another example here, though, which is that software is somewhat unique in that it's a virtual good. So it's not like you've got somebody who's just going to set up shop on every street corner right outside Starbucks and start handing out free coffee, right? But that is what happens in the software space, right? Some VCs like, I've got enough money to give out free coffee for 2 years. We're going to see how many users we can get. We're going to do that, and people go out of business, right? Alternative business models in software is something that we need to be thinking about.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I use the example of pay TV here in Australia. It's like watching the Titanic sink in slow motion because, Netflix announced recently they have 200,000 active subscribers in Australia. I don't know if you know this, but Netflix is not available in Australia. But thanks to thanks to Unblock Us, we can just reroute our IPs, pretend we're in the States or the UK. I've got a Netflix account. At Foxtel, our pay TV channel is like $70 or $80 a month for ads and rubbish programming. Netflix cost me $12 a month, right? So, I think you're absolutely right, Alex. We do need to look at alternative business models. Here's an interesting statistic from Matt Mullenweg's State of the Word presentation, where he gave the results of the WordPress developer and user survey that they sent out. Now, get this: 6,800 respondents classify themselves as WordPress developers, responsible for about 170,000 websites, charging an average of $50 per hour. That's the kind of the marketplace that we're playing in, right? So one of the things that occurs to me is at $50 an hour, which I think is way too low for the skills and the expertise that we offer our clients, but I think one of the business models that we've certainly been exploring is how we can educate our customers who are developers to get more value out of our products, raise their prices, add more value to their clients so they can become more profitable. So it becomes this, and I know there are some, in the internet marketing space, this is very popular where, hey, here's some software that you can buy from us, but you're also going to get all of this training and all of these webinars and all of this extra material where we'll show you how to use our software to make more profit, make more revenue, which helps you become more sustainable. That means you're going to be using our software over a longer period of time. And the other interesting statistic that I'd love to ask you guys is, what do we think the average, if you're selling plugins to developers, what do we think the average lifespan is of a WordPress freelancer or a small team of like a team of 2 or 3? Because we're pulling some of the stats out of our database that indicate, my gut at the moment tells me from a high level that a WordPress freelancer, believe it or not, in this new space, has a lifespan of about 2.5 to 3 years. And then they either hit the wall or they go and get a job because they can't sustain themselves. I'd be interested to see what kind of experience you guys have had.
I mean, for interviewing other freelancers for the last 2 years and seeing all sorts of people starting to move around after the 2-year mark, I'd say you're dead on with that number. And just going to work, and you and I speaking about sort of the same topics, going to WordPress meetups up in Boston and Providence, you see it all the time. Like, you see the people showing up and they're pumped to sell stuff or sell their services business, and then you don't see them after a year, or they just say, well, I just got a job, it didn't really work out. So
yeah. which is kind of cool because there's a new audience coming through every couple of years, but there's no longevity in that.
Right. We've got an interesting churn rate.
Yeah. Shane, have you got any data on that?
No, we're the same. I feel like that's changing a little, but it's, Jake had that topic on training and education. It's hard for me to separate what that looks like organically without influence to what that looks like when we actually take the time to increase somebody's longevity. Call it artificially or intentionally, however you want. Historically, about 2 years, 2 to 3 is the life cycle. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they stop freelancing. That means that often they just pivot their business.
Yeah.
So, sometimes it's due to life cycle, sometimes it's due to key opportunities. A lot of times we see freelancers like, well, my one biggest client made an offer I couldn't refuse. And we see that a lot. And to me, that's not a freelance fail. It's just you were good enough that somebody came along and made you an attractive offer. And often we'll see those people go back to freelance at the end of that cycle. I mean, we're 14 years into this now. I've seen people come back, go, and still come back again.
I guess 2 to 3 years is a similar amount of time for agency full-timers as well, right? Because they switch jobs,
Yeah, I mean, that's an industry issue. I mean, people change jobs every 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
I do think that, can I just say something about that? I think that people are, when they come into this business and they are raring to go, like you said, they're like, yeah, I'm gonna build sites and I'm gonna work from home and I'm not gonna wear pants, like that's work and all that. It's like it all sounds so dreamy, and they can't sustain themselves for a few reasons. I think that this like entry, raring to go, and then not really knowing how to price, plus needing to price lower in order to get their first clients. It undercuts the whole industry. It actually damages everyone. They can't sustain themselves. I see it with a lot of freelancers here that what happens is they're too cheap, so they're like trying to manage, so then they win more business. So they've got like 15 clients all yelling at them at the same time, and then they can't sustain it, and then they burn out or they really just can't pay their bills, and then they're like, that's it, and they go get a job. And I don't see people coming back from that after, because the burnout is so severe that a lot of people at that point would rather just sit in a cubicle and like say yes boss than have to listen to 15 yelling clients. So unfortunately, that's how the freelance business goes. I don't know if there's a solution to that. And I just want to address the other thing that you mentioned about trying to sell premium products while helping freelancers do better in their business. And again, I can only speak from my own point of view, but whenever anyone tries to do that to me, I'm so jaded. I'm just like, either it's going to give me value or it's not. So like the example that I gave before about Gravity Forms and like the Events Calendar plugin, it's like it's a software package unto itself. It would take hundreds, not thousands of hours to code, and I get to provide lots of value, and it's really easy to use for my clients. Like training and that, it's not going to speak to me. I don't know what the answer is to improving the state of the industry in terms of the sustainability of freelancers, who are often the target audience for these types of products. But unfortunately, it's very, very tough. And that's all I have to say about that.
Can I ask everybody a curiosity question? Because I think Alex is bringing up a really good question, which is, yes, you can make money trying to sell up front and so forth, but we're starting to see a lot of alternative business models. Can you guys share some of the stuff you're seeing or some of the stuff you're trying, what's working, what's not? And maybe we can just give people ideas in terms of the experiments that are happening.
Yeah, sure. So the stuff we're doing, I guess we're doing SaaS with Happy Tables, but that's direct to consumer, not all developers. So I think that's kind of a different model.
Still fine.
But yeah, that works well there. It works very well there. A restaurant owner.
Premium band, or is that straight?
As a freemium band, yeah, as a freemium band, that's pretty generous because it's worth us. Like, there's a huge benefit to us in terms of getting a lot of people on the platform. We learn a lot from those users, and because it's a fully hosted service, we can track as much data as we want. So that's valuable. Other things we're doing, I think the backup WordPress is, I guess, our most normal WordPress plugin that's got some paid extensions. I thought for a bit about what model to use for that, and I like the kind of central free plugin with paid extensions, kind of the WooCommerce or the Easy Digital Downloads model. I think in terms of the total spend of a user, you end up with more if you split features out into extensions and sell them all for $10 each rather than charging $50 for the whole thing. and users get the feeling that they've picked and chosen the things they want, and they're not paying for things they don't want, which is like nice on their end. So I think if you've just got some like a plugin to sell, that's my kind of favorite model there.
Here's an idea for something that's not like directly related to what's going on, but what we've done for clients is, and maybe there's some way to tie in some kind of revenue share model for this type of thing, but if there's a lot of companies out there that for them there could be value to having a free WordPress plugin. You know, somehow helping people tie their service into their site really easily, right? And often those plugins are pretty simple and straightforward, and also they don't need that much support. But first of all, it adds marketing value to the company that now has that WordPress plugin, because, you know, millions of people use WordPress and they're looking for plugins, and, you know, they'll hopefully they can find it, and then they can find out about this service. So it's like a way into this third-party, let's say, SaaS service. And if possibly we as WordPress developers can come up with some kind of model where we provide that type of service to other companies, where we reduce the price of development for the plugin, or I don't know, this is like, or even for ourselves, we develop a third-party service to use the plugin. I don't know. It's instead of like selling the plugin directly as a piece of software on its own, use it rather as a marketing lead-in, like you guys were talking about in a way for the freemium for something else. That's just something that we did recently, and it has made me think about that as a possibility for the future.
Yeah, Alex, do you think there's some merit in making free plugins as a developer as a credibility indicator to try and land bigger clients?
Well, I mean, there's lots of different ways to market yourself, sure. Showing what you can do is always a good marketing mechanism. As far as Shane's question of, you know, alternative revenue streams, I mean, we all do stuff on the web. There's a reason why there's so much advertising and sponsorship on the web. It's basically because advertisers are willing to outbid consumers, right? We've got a product, whether it's content or software or whatever, and the person that's putting it out there is trying to get us the most money that they can for it, and they can get more money from sponsors, from advertisers, than they can from consumers directly, right? People signing up to access the content, right? There are exceptions to this all over the place, but as a general rule, it's why we can go to all these websites and read content for free and suffer through the ads. The other example I would bring up is Automatic, WordPress.com, right? All of the things, you know, they have a huge investment in software, most of which they release for free, and they make all of their money on the hosting service, right? It's you know, an example of monetizing that software in another way.
So I think so you've got the advertisers, which is dead on, and then there's variants in that. There's direct ads, there's affiliate, there's partnerships, there's lead capture, and a lot of these, like, they make real money for us. Like, I mean, we just had an interesting conversation with a startup that's looking to do it's a payment gateway, and essentially they've been able to negotiate like back-end rates that are interesting enough that there's the opportunity for us, you know, that we were introduced to through WooCommerce, and they were like, hey, these guys live in your town, you should talk to them. And there's the opportunity, and who knows, we have to explore it, but that we can make money off the float. And that means that, you know, the average shop owner pays somewhere around 1.9% of credit card fees. That's just normal. And if there's enough volume and you can aggregate it together, you can bargain that down based on volume. Well, there's the opportunity if you're a payment gateway provider, an e-commerce business, or some, you know, selling tickets, something that where you're leveraging that for your users. Well, if you bring all your users' volume together, well, suddenly now that actually becomes legitimate, And you can go back and say, look, we've got $10 million a month worth of tickets. I don't know. I'm making random numbers up. Don't quote me on that. Well, suddenly the credit card company is having a very different conversation with you than when you were selling $150 a month. And so there's opportunities in there to make money on the gap in between.
Yeah.
All right. Hey.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say partnerships is something that we're definitely exploring with this, either with other agencies, because we know how we use it as an agency, and or going to theme shops and things like that to help extend themes, and they don't want to get into the development side. So that is one thing that I'm actually heavily focused on, and again, that's just another tidbit of partnerships.
If only you guys were privy to the chat that was going on in the green room here. It's far more entertaining. Anyway, hey, we're going to take a short break. We're going to take about a 10-minute break to, use the lavatories, grab yourself a coffee, go start a ticketing business, whatever you need to do in that 10-minute break. And we're going to come back and we're going to talk about end-to-end WordPress-based solutions. Think Happy Tables, think Obox Instant, that kind of thing, and we're going to be talking about training resources and what that means for training your customers if you're in the B2B space, or training your clients, or training end users, customers, how to use your product. So we're going to be talking about all of that after the break. In the meantime, everyone go take a break, do whatever you need to do, and we'll be back very shortly. Welcome back, Groovers. Hey, by the way, just big shout out to Miriam Schwab here, by the way, because what is it, like 4 a.m. where you are right now, Miriam, or something ridiculous?
No.
Like I get later every time.
Exactly. I just, for sympathy, I changed the time zone, the clock there. It's 1 in the morning.
It's 1 in the morning.
But because my kids are on vacation, we're on the most insane schedule that I'm actually really awake this time. So
right. Excellent. So, because we've got people in the UK, I'm obviously here in Australia, it's 8:10 in the morning here, and we've got people in Europe. This was seemed like the best time to have this event. Of course, then summertime kicks in at certain places around the world, and I'm either up at 6 or Miriam's still up at 1. So we do try and accommodate everyone. Okay, so, but thank you so much for putting in the hard yards. All right, now, training resources. Let's talk about, Jake Goldman suggested that we talk about training resources, were his 2 words. Thanks for the verbose explanation of your suggested topic, Jake. Really appreciate that. So I'm obviously very passionate about training resources, but rather than me flap my gums, I think it would be far more interesting if we hear from you guys. So who's got something interesting to say about WordPress training resources? Matt, let's start with you. Let's talk about the Matt Report.
Oh boy, yeah. So do a lot of talking to other WordPress entrepreneurs. Do a membership site where folks can join to have those kinds of discussions. But in terms of resources for folks that are learning, freelance services. Shane has an amazing resource list, for Modern Tribe and folks like that. And just turning to your local WordPress meetup, WordCamps, things like that are great for folks that are learning to jump into this stuff, especially business tracks and things like that. And so we spend a lot of time doing that. We spend a lot of time training people on how to use WordPress and WordPress plugins, and we do a lot through our YouTube channel as well. But really what it always comes down to for our clients anyway is sort of just the hands-on stuff. We've tried automating a lot of it, and it works for some, but a lot of folks just need to have group meetings and real slow user interactions and drawing things on a whiteboard just so they understand where it's all going.
Miriam, I'm interested to see how you tackle client training or training new staff in WordPress for that matter.
Oh, that's a good one.
Training new staff is more difficult than training clients because we have all these processes that are very important to us, and we want the staff to follow them, and that takes way more time than training clients, thanks to the simplicity of WordPress in general. So I'll talk more about clients, I guess. With clients, first of all,
Miriam, I just need to point something out here. Shane Perlman has left the building and has been replaced by his dog. So this could get... Oh, Shane Perlman's back, sorry. Sorry, Miriam, go on. Shane, we thought you'd been replaced by your dog there, Shane.
Yeah, I mean, my dog's actually smarter than I am, so he'd be in good hands.
Sorry, Miriam, go on. Miriam's talking
That's
about
okay.
training staff, training new staff, and training clients in WordPress.
So with clients, we do implement your video user manuals on all our sites. But unfortunately, I'm sorry to say this, but our clients don't want to do that. They don't want to sit there watching videos. So we try to refer them to it, but in the end, they want us to hold their hands a little bit more. So we have it there so that we can, say, oh, look over there. But for every site that launches, we do have like a 2-hour training session with the interested parties on the other end, where it's very intensive, and we go through the main things, and then we say, okay, go on your way, and you will definitely have issues, and then contact us for those issues. And one thing that I try to do for client support requests after that point is to not actually talk to the client about it, because you could have a whole long philosophical discussion about where the button is. So we use Jing a lot, or you can use any screencast software, where a client says, how do I do this, or this isn't working, and to fix it plus teach them, we'll do it, take a screencast, send to them, and say, here you go, and then that way also they can refer to it down the line if they ever need to. So Jing and that kind of thing is really useful for holding the client's hand. And then after that, we have a ticket system.
You on chat on that exact topic. Like, what are the skills that you need for your staff members when they start working for you? Like when you're looking at basically like what's the baseline as somebody's coming in, and then how do you grow from somebody from wherever they come in to a senior person that you want to hold on to forever?
This is a question from Lisa in the chat widget, Miriam.
Okay. Oh, thanks. Oh, hi, Lisa. Hi. She tweeted to me before. So, first of all, we want someone with obviously a lot of WordPress experience, but we have a few types of people who work for us. We have the project managers and we have the developers. So developers should, have good, proven WordPress development, PHP and whatever skills, front end, back end, whatever it is that we need for them to do. The project managers are a little bit more difficult because we don't just need them to know WordPress really well. We need them to be organized and also be able to communicate with clients. When we price projects, and if a client asks, I'll say to them that 50% of the time that I'm estimating here is talking to you. It's really like that. And if that communication goes well, the client's happy and the project goes smoothly. If it doesn't, then it's a mess. So we need someone who's personable, and unfortunately, it's really hard to tell that before they actually start working with you and with clients. So in terms of like on their resume, we look for strong WordPress skills. They've built sites, they've worked with clients and things like that. And then and the interview is really important so that we can see how they are in terms of communication. And then after that, the rest they learn on the job. And we spend a lot of time supporting our new employees, and that's a really difficult thing because we were talking about the life cycle of employees, and we can spend a year investing in someone in the company to get them up to par, to a place where we feel like, all right, now you can take a project and run with it, and we feel okay about it. And then a year later, they could be gone, right? They could move on for whatever reason, and it's very difficult from an agency point of view, that whole employee training, retention, and that's how.
Miriam, a question from Jafe in the chat window. Tom, you'll be pleased to know Jafe's not working right now. He's watching WP Think Tank. Do you create a library of these videos for all clients for future reference, or are the Jing videos that you make too specific? Like, do you make generic ones that you store in a library, or do you just make specific ones for each client? Good question, Jay.
It's a very good question. So actually, for the generic ones, we rely on your video user manual plugin. Because we're not video producers, and it works really well, and it covers the basics. So in terms of an ROI on a plugin, that's right there, because rather than having to produce the videos ourselves and and keep them updated and all that plugin does that for us. So that's the generic one. The Jing and the screencasting is for specific needs for specific clients. Sometimes it's for something that the general videos might cover, but the client's not going to watch the whole thing. Just help them and let them get going. And often in a lot of the sites that we build, there's custom functionality, and that's just, we don't have a generic video for it. So we need to show them exactly where to go in order to do what they need to do.
Cool.
Yeah.
Another question, which I think anyone can answer this. When you employ developers, we've been using testsforgeeks.com to get like a basic understanding of their HTML and CSS and PHP level. Anyone else got any resources that you use to test technical skill before you employ a developer?
We've got a couple of things that we do. I mean, the first is really obvious. Go look at their GitHub or Bitbucket account. I mean, nobody makes it to actually a conversation without us looking at code. If you're applying for a development position. So we'll look at your portfolio, we'll actually look at your code, we'll look at your contributions. I mean, that's the best part about being an open source. If you're active, you're already working in public. Not only do I get to see how you code, I get to see how you talk to people in written format. Like it's really wonderful. So that's a real starting point. From there, like our recruiting process, somebody on the team will have a 10-minute conversation just to make sure they're not a crazy person, because sometimes that happens. If they make it past the crazy person test, we'll usually at that point have a real interview, and then we have a trial. And our trial's paid, and it's about a 4 to 6 hour worth of work. So it usually takes place over a couple of days. And we have a few default ones we use, but honestly, most of the time we'd rather pick something from an active project if we can, because it's fresh in everybody's mind, and it's relevant and interesting, and people feel more engaged. Like what we used to have, like these just templated test projects, what we found was we're as interested to see how they interact with the team as we are in how they actually code, and that we weren't getting a lot of interaction in the templated projects. So we're still like experimenting with that.
How do you have people report on the back on the trial project? Like, do you do it in GitHub and they like actively do it? Do you have them blog about it? Like, how do they prove to you, the work that they put in, so to speak? So
that's great. So we have two different. I mean, a few designers have one type, devs, support people have a very different trial process. But for the devs, since that's what we're talking about, they get access to a repo in Git, and they make commits, and they're working with usually there's 3 or 4 other people on that project. And we toss them in Slack into that project for the day. We're like, hey, you're working on this. And so for the couple of days they're working, we're watching the conversation. There's usually one technical lead for that project who volunteers, and they're paid for it, but is paid for the time to oversee the test. So whenever we run a trial, there's somebody who like, hey, your buddy is going to be, Jonathan, whose birthday today. Happy birthday, Jonathan. Or it's, or whoever, if it's the designers, it's one of our art directors or lead designers, back-end themers, and sometimes 3 or 4 people, because the team just likes to be engaged. Like, they know that if this goes well, this is somebody they're going to work with. And so they have a lot of impact. In fact, to the point where a lot of the partners have stepped back from this process now, and the team tends to run the trials a lot more. And then if they sort of make it past the team, then we'll have a conversation with them.
Alex King, I'm curious, at an enterprise level, how do you? I kind of imagine, and it's certainly been our very limited experience that we've had with the guys at QuickBooks, is that it's actually been really easy to pass off a site to those guys because they have resources internally to manage this stuff. Whereas when you're dealing with really small business, you're generally dealing with like the owner of the business or their assistant, and they're just so stretched for time and money and resources. Whereas we've found dealing with some larger companies that it's training them is actually easier. What's your experience, and how do you handle training enterprise level clients?
Yeah, I think you're right. Enterprise clients typically will have a team in place already ready to take ownership of something, if that was the plan. Like either it's going to be something that they continue to engage a third party on, or it's going to be something that they bring in-house, and they know that, which it's going to be going in. If it's going to be something that they bring in-house, training is going to be something that you've discussed at the beginning of the project. It's going to be something that's in scope. So as stuff is being built, there's documentation. We have documentation internally of our own internal processes and best practices, and we have that set up in such a way that we can turn that over to a client as necessary, so that they can continue those best practices if they choose to. Things like the way for projects we use GitHub Flow, which is basically a branching model of feature branches that go back into master, and master gets deployed. We have our automation tools that make it easy to deploy a site and roll it back. So all of those things are documented and handed off. That's on the technical side. On the user side, it varies site to site, but it may be a series of videos, it may be annotated screenshots, it may be some written documentation about how various features work. Another thing that we try to do is build QA test plans for sites. So as we're working through the project, milestone 1, here are the things that we built, here are the things that we test. And if you build that up slowly, you end up with a very robust testing document that can then be handed off to the client. And it's also kind of a nice way of letting the client know, like, hey, I know you probably haven't thought about half of this stuff, but here are all the things that we're going through and testing, all these various edge cases and things like that that we're taking care of for your project, which helps them gain a better understanding of what goes into the development process. And my experience has been the more everyone is on the same page about what's going on, the easier those client communications are, the easier it is when you have to have a conversation about something that might otherwise be a little bit difficult.
Do you, I imagine a lot of the freelancers and kind of small teams, client training is a big time suck, and it's really hard to factor in. It's hard to kind of say to a client, well, we're going to have to spend 3 hours or 4 hours training you how to use this thing, and then you're going to have to pay for that training. At a small business level with freelancers, that's a difficult conversation to have. As you get bigger and you have more resources in your team, it's actually easier to manage this because you have more resources and you have clients largely with bigger budgets. Are there any ideas for how to have that conversation with clients if you're a smaller team, or the expectation that a client says, well, you're building a website on a content management system, why do I then need to pay a couple of $100 for you to teach me how to use it?
So let me change that question just a little bit.
Sure.
Say, just like you have more experienced developers and freelancers, you also have more experienced clients. And the more experienced a client is, the more they understand the value of different things. And so I think that it's not a small or large client issue, it's a client experience issue.
On top of that, I would add that the conversation for us often goes like this. So we should talk about what happens the day we go live. We should talk about what happens in order to go live, and then we should talk about what happens after we go live. And that conversation encompasses lots of things, training being one of them, but their ongoing upgrade plan. Do they have any future features? Like this is a conversation of software life cycle and relationship cycle, of which training is just one part of that conversation. And it's not, even if you're working with a small yoga studio or somebody who's just building a website, it's not you want me to pay you to train you. It's, hey, what's your plan for this thing? And if the plan is, I want you to hand me code and walk away and I will never call you, that's a great plan. I'm a really big fan of that plan. If the plan is, I'm going to call you all the time, well, then that's okay too, but we need to figure out an arrangement by which you're not going to be disappointed.
Mm.
Yeah, it's one of the things that we've been fine-tuning is our belief document as an agency, and handing a belief document over to a client before we're even talking about specs, deliverables, price, timeline. It's like, here's what we believe in, here's who we are, here's the process that we use, and does this sound good to you? Like Shane was just saying, like, we look at it as a relationship. Is that cool with you, or are you more like, give me the cheapest thing as fast as possible? And then we get that sort of understanding out of the way, and it's a lengthy process, and we just tell them up front, like, we might not be the right fit for you, and that's a good thing for both of us, because we don't want to be strangling each other at the end of this engagement.
Yeah.
So.
All right, let's segue into the next topic. Of course, there is an easy way to handle training, end-user training, and that is just to build a product that's so numpty, stupid, easy to use that you don't need to train them. Tom Wilmot and Human Made have done that with Happy Tables, and so now what we're going to talk about now is something that I'm really super passionate about, and this is something that is keeping me awake at night, is and Tom, I'll tell you what, instead of me trying to articulate it, why don't you tell us why you suggested this topic and what this topic is, in fact.
Hi, everyone. Bye, everybody.
See you, Shane.
See you, Shane.
Great to chat.
Yeah,
Thanks for joining us, buddy.
I have to go too, everybody. Sorry,
No
Tom.
problem,
I really
Matt.
wanted to hear this.
Hey, no worries, man.
No worries,
I
Matt.
think
Take
it's being
care.
recorded, so.
Yeah.
It is being recorded.
All right,
Yeah,
guys.
it's
Take care.
recording.
Bye, Miriam.
All right, hit us, Tom.
Okay, so I mean, I guess my thinking for this really, and it segues nicely from Alex King's topic, I think, which is that, like, well, both sides of this, I think, feed to the same conclusion. But on the pricing side of things, which is, I think a nice segue. Take, for example, WooCommerce, right? Like, WooCommerce is free. I don't know what their average spend for someone who's buying extensions is, but let's say it's like $200. But what's the average price of say a small e-commerce site? I'd guess it's $500, $2,000, something like that. So the slice of the pie that WooCommerce are getting out of that transaction, because they're not selling they're not selling a plugin to developers. They're selling an e-commerce solution, which is ultimately going to be used by an end user, right? But they're selling that via this WebAssembler who builds the actual site and makes a huge amount of profit, makes a massive markup on that plugin, like 10x markup on that plugin. So WooCommerce are leaving a huge amount of money on the table by doing that, and they're, to the end user, providing they're losing control over the experience that they give that end user because it has to go through a WebAssembler who may be like really bad. They may give a really bad experience to that end user. They may portray WooCommerce in a bad light. They may not upsell the extensions in the best possible way. So when I think about the future of like the low end, as I call it, or the long tail, which is like the bulk of the WordPress market, these small sites under $10,000, say under $5,000, that are being built by freelancers and small agencies, and maybe have a shelf life of 2 or 3 years. Like a lot of those at the moment are built as a conglomeration of like something like some hosting, maybe from one of the managed WordPress hosts, some plugins, maybe WooCommerce, maybe Gravity Forms, a premium theme, and maybe the developers spent a few $100s getting all those things, and then they're putting a big markup on that and selling it on to the consumer. So, for Happy Tables, which, so obviously, I believe fully that something like Happy Tables is a much better answer to that problem of we want to provide restaurants, we want restaurants to use WordPress because we think that's great and they can have a good experience. Like we could have, with Happy Tables, we could have released a restaurant theme, or we could have released a menus plugin, right? And we could have charged for both of those. But if we'd have done that, that wouldn't have been at all the best solution for restaurant owners, right? They've still got to find a local web designer, or they've got to be technical enough to know what hosting is and put all that together. So I mean, I guess I'm not necessarily I obviously think Happy Tables is definitely the solution there, and I'm like amazed that something like WooCommerce doesn't have a hosted solution that's like Shopify. But because but I obviously think that's the future. But I was kind of interested to get other people's takes on that, like the problems with the current model, which I think we discussed quite a lot when we were talking about the kind of iOS and the commoditization of that market. But that was from the point of view of selling to developers, when really like Shane is selling to consumers who need an event calendar on their site, right? Like I need to run events for my business. That's the ultimate customer for something like Events Calendar Pro, even if it ends up going through a developer. So like, isn't the ultimate solution there some way to sell that directly to the people that actually are going to use it?
So the thing that occurs to me is, won't Automatic just do this? I mean, they're already doing it with restaurants, right? When I'm looking at WordPress.com/restaurants right now, and I can sign up for an e-commerce business restaurant solution for $300 a year, right? Did that make you nervous when you launched Happy Tables to go head-to-head with Automatic? Or, will this kind of activity from Automatic keep people out of this space, do you think?
So I mean, Happy Tables was around a long time before WordPress.com launched their /restaurants thingy. Just to be clear on that.
Yeah. I like the way you refer to it as their /restaurants thingy.
I'm sure it's great. Like, to be honest, we weren't hugely worried about it, because the thing that makes Happy Tables good is that it's focused 100% on solving the problems restaurants have, right? And WordPress.com isn't. It's focused on solving the problems for all the verticals they support. So I know that we can provide a much better user experience because Happy Tables only does that. So that, I think that will eventually win out. User experience is all that matters in these things, right? Like the person using the site needs to find that pleasurable. If they do, you're winning. And I know we can provide a better user experience.
I think this is really timely too, and I want. Sorry, Alex, I'll come to you in a second. I think this is really timely too. Yesterday, Envato have these giveaways where they have Envato's Most Wanted. They give away cash prizes to encourage developers to build things where there is currently an undersupply and an over demand. Their current Most Wanted is micro niche themes. So they are realizing now, with the millions of users that they have and millions of visits they get, they realize that there are people searching for example, legal WordPress themes, and the supply is just not matching the demand. So they've put 10 grand up as a cash prize, split amongst different winners, to encourage developers to build micro niche themes. So I actually think the timing here is really good that we're having this conversation. Alex?
Yeah, I agree with Tom that the overall experience of a verticalized solution is going to be a lot better than here's a generic platform, here's some things that you can turn on to turn it into something resembling what you would get in this vertical. However, the things only have to get so good if they're also free, right? Getting back to our monetization stuff, right? If you're getting undercut by 70%, then pretty soon people are like, well, we like that a lot better, but can't really justify the difference in cost, right? So yes, I agree with you. I think that I think more people should be doing exactly what you're doing with Happy Tables, but I wouldn't discount the WordPress.com offerings completely.
No, sure, and it would be incredibly short-sighted of me to do that, for sure. I was being a bit glib about them. I think that that's true, and especially when someone as large as Automatic, who can afford to just make a really good restaurant platform and release it for free. They could afford to do that, right, if they wanted to, or some VC-backed company could afford to come in and put far more resources than we've put into Happy Tables. I think that if you are doing that generically, though, a platform like Squarespace is a pretty good example of that. They are putting even more resources into it than Automatic are, probably, and have an incredibly slick system. But even they are not, provide a much worse experience to restaurant owners, say, than something like Happy Tables. And so I think that like you're right, it does have to be better, but I don't think that it's that difficult to be much better if you are totally just focused on that niche, right? Like, especially with something like restaurants, where a lot of the feature set that matters are things like partnerships, right? Like partnering with online ordering companies, and those partnerships just take a lot of investment to set up. So if you're a generic platform and you want to have 100 verticals, incredibly difficult to go and set up partnerships across all those 100 verticals. Incredibly difficult to provide targeted support across all those verticals.
Yeah, you should also get kind of a head start on where trends are going and things like that, because you're embedded right there with those customers. You can provide better support for them because you understand their business better. You're not trying to provide support across all those other generic platforms. I agree.
And like ultimately, I think the difference that Happy Tables should have is that Happy Tables is like helping you run your restaurant business, whereas Squarespace or WordPress.com is helping you run your website, right? Like at Happy Tables, we actually understand the industry. We can provide tools that go far beyond a website because we understand the industry.
Miriam, do you find yourself building essentially, very similar solutions for clients over time? And have you thought, wow, we could take this solution that we're building and kind of chunk it into modules and offer it as a hosted kind of vending machine DIY solution, for want of a better term, in a similar way that that Human Made have done for Happy Tables?
So as we're developing things, we definitely develop custom functionality that we think, okay, we should do something with this. Most of the time we think we should release it as a free plugin, and unfortunately we don't get around to that. But we recently developed something for a client that I really think that we should get around to repackaging it and selling it on a larger scale. And I even mentioned it at one point on a Stack Exchange thread. It's like deep down in there, and I have people writing to me going, "So did you develop it?" So I think that there's a market interest in it. It's a type of communication. I don't want to get into it too much at this point. But one of the things that's holding me back, and I really need to get over it, I think, and maybe you guys can help me with that, is servers. It would be a hosted solution, right? And it actually, because it's communication, there's a lot that happens per site for sure, and particularly if the community grows. And servers freak me out.
Well, I think that's a healthy fear.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Well, I mean, it's just a very different. We used to have a hosting business as well, and the 24/7 operations team that you need to do something like that is very different than the kind of 9 to 5 or 10 to 7 or whatever it is expectations of a developer and a services company.
Yeah, so there's that, and then there's also server resources and managing that. I mean, WordPress Automatic has Barry Abramson, right? I mean, it's his job. It's just to make sure that everything is running as smoothly and as efficiently as possible. And it's just, I don't know how you guys do it. Meaning, I know we would obviously need someone who's a server expert, but anyways, that's my biggest hesitation, getting into that whole server, yes, 24/7, keep everything running, being able to scale. That's just my biggest hesitation.
Tom, perhaps you can help there. What from an infrastructure point of view, Miriam's got some real concerns that's stopping her maybe getting into that space, and I'm sure everyone listening and watching this has. I mean, we have the same concerns thinking about hosting software solutions. My business partner just gets a headache when I start talking to him about it. How do you, and from a lean point of view, how do you skin that cat without going and setting up your own data center?
So we probably wouldn't have done Happy Tables had we have been fearful of servers, honestly. Like, we are good at server stuff, and that was why it was easy to do something like Happy Tables. It was like an obvious step for us to host it, because we already had that. But honestly, especially these days, servers are not hard, right? Like Amazon, cloud services, that stuff's pretty easy. It scales, it's cheap. It's not that difficult to get something running that's surprisingly cheap, that's going to scale to like thousands of people having sites on it, which frankly at that point, good problem to have. You can just hire somebody to do it properly.
That's true.
Also, you can just partner with a host, especially if it's, there's like some kind of cross promotional partnership opportunity. If Happy Tables could be hosted on one of the managed hosts, say, and it could have a little thing that says powered by. I'm sure most of them will be open to that. I think you can just partner with someone who does get it, but I wouldn't be too afraid of doing it yourself. Like we have come a long way since the days where you had to get a dedicated server and like SSH in and install Linux.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah. Alex, you got any ideas on talking about trends and let's get out the Alex King crystal ball, or let's ask the stormtrooper over your right shoulder what he thinks. Just wanted to call out the stormtrooper, by the way, and invite him into the conversation. What do you think the obvious kind of industries or niches are for, like, if I came to you and said, listen, I got a lot of money and I want you guys to build me the next happy tables, what industry would you suggest that we start looking at? Or what problem do you think that we would start looking at trying to solve?
Yeah, I don't like going about business that way. If the solution isn't obvious to me, like I don't go looking for a problem to solve. Like there are enough problems that we see all around us every day that if you're paying attention, like, oh, I could do that better, I could do that better. I mean, pick one of those. You don't need to. There's certainly, you can do the market research, you can, evaluate competition and potential and all of that stuff. It's kind of a soulless way to run a business, in my opinion. I mean, the great products are made by passionate people, and if you're building something that you really care about, I think that you're going to be a lot more successful.
Good answer. I can't argue with that. Anything, Tom or Miriam, anything obvious, any low-hanging fruit that you guys see, well, this is a problem that we would like to solve in the kind of hosted WordPress solution space?
So I think it's an obvious place for the WordPress hosts to go. Like, they are one step in that direction. They're matching WordPress software with hosting, at least. Like, the next step for them is probably like when you sign up to you sign up to Pantheon, you get your WordPress site, like they start asking you what kind of site it is and suggest some themes. And then maybe they start suggesting like some plugins, and slowly but surely they end up with some small set of verticals that they're kind of supporting. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if hosts start doing that. It seems like a natural next step for them, which is for all intents and purposes a pretty similar thing. I would never do one of these verticals without, like Alex said, without someone who was passionate about the industry and knew the industry. Because honestly, building something like Happy Tables isn't the hard bit. The hard bit is working out like actually what restaurant owners want and getting it in front of them. They're the two difficult things, and you need distribution credentials within the restaurant industry or within the hairdressers or whatever you decide to choose. And you need someone who even understands what the problems are in hairdressing to be able to build a solution that like solves those problems. Yeah.
So looking at Obox Instant, which is an example that you gave, and I'm a big fan of Obox themes and Obox Mobile and some of the solutions these guys put out. Obox Instant looks like a generic hosted website solution for your business. So it's not niche specific. Any small business can come and set up a website for $49 a month. It's built on WordPress. You get a theme. You can add whatever plugins you like. It's got WooCommerce baked into it. Testimonials, portfolios baked into it. All the cool stuff that we know and love about WordPress. Do you think this kind of generic solution is a good idea, or do you think they should get more specific about the industry that they're targeting? Because the thing is, when you try and talk to what we've found over the years is when you try and talk to a large audience of people, if you try and please everyone, you end up just pleasing nobody, because you end up talking in such generic, broad brushstrokes that you don't actually resonate with anyone. So I'm curious as to the decision that they've made to go down this road, and I don't know. I have no idea if they're successful or if the whole thing's. I have no idea how they're going, but I'm curious as to whether we're going to see more of this, or do you think we need to get more specific in terms of the niches that we target?
So yeah, I think this is the natural next step for theme companies. Like, it cuts out a step for the consumer, right? At the moment, I have to go to WooThemes. I buy a theme, I download it, I get hosting, I upload the theme. Lots of steps there. You can remove most of those steps and just create a, one-click. I've got hosting. So that seems like a natural next step that sort of like makes the whole process a lot less frictional for the user who's buying it. In terms of being niche, like a lot of people do set up generic websites, especially at the low end where they're buying themes in the first place. So I don't necessarily think you need to go super niche. You can go, if you're going to go super niche, you can probably charge more. And also, I guess, like, theme companies do still all, they might have 200 themes, but each of those themes is probably fairly niche. So I like the hosting plus a theme doesn't necessarily need to be that specific. Like, that covers most use cases. So I think it's a step in the right direction. I think the next step would be even more tailored, for sure. But I think it's a good step. I don't know why every theme company doesn't do this.
Alex, I mean, I was, talking to Rebecca Gill from Web Savvy Marketing at WordCamp Chicago, and her theme shop, she gave this great presentation on building a theme business. Her theme shop, when she first launched it, was doing okay. She said she was, doing $2,000 or $3,000 a month in theme sales, which, hey, it's nothing to sneeze at. But she said when she started focusing on, the first one she launched was a theme for parent-teacher organizations, PTA theme, Parent-Teacher Association, and it went nuts because it solved a very specific problem and spoke to a very specific audience. Now she's got themes for lawyers and accountants, and each theme she only launches a theme if she knows that she can get organic traffic. She does keyword research, works out where there's a need, and goes and fills that need. So that's an obvious next step for her, is to bundle, for that kind of business, is to bundle hosting with it and provide a full end-to-end solution. Alex, I'm curious as to, and Tom, I'm curious as to what we can learn from enterprise-level clients about providing end-to-end solutions. Like, what are the obvious things that you need to have in an end-to-end solution to keep the client happy?
You mean like packaging the development with a hosting solution or something like that?
Yeah.
Enterprise. I'm going to say enterprise clients don't typically want that. They often have various bits of infrastructure and technology that they want to leverage. Maybe this is probably not the only website that they have. They have an existing hosting relationship somewhere and they want this site added to that cluster, managed by those same resources, etc. They want one person to call when there's something's wrong with the site, and if that's an internal team, that's going to be an internal team. There certainly are, just like there are enterprise customers that decide that this property is going to always be, or for the foreseeable future, going to be managed by a third party. Like those, I could see wanting hosting packaged in a little bit more, but I think the thing in working with enterprise clients is just that working with a larger entity, there's more people involved on their side and on your side, and so certain things that are simpler when there are fewer people involved naturally get more complicated when there's more people involved. And so I think that some of the reasons why these hosted solutions are the full solution is so appealing to small businesses is because they don't have an IT department. They don't have the technical resources in-house so they don't really necessarily know how to approach the problem. It's not even, they don't know how to solve it. They don't know the right questions to ask. And so an out-of-the-box solution to them takes care of the whole thing, right?
Yeah. And do you think that WordPress VIP or WordPress
Maybe we lost Troy.
Yeah, I was wondering if it was just me.
Okay, well, I'll come in on that. So I think I mostly agree with you on the enterprise side of things. Like, my experience with enterprise is that they like to think that their needs are unique, and so they like to think that they're paying you, lots of money to customize whatever they're purchasing for their needs because they're a special, special enterprise, special big business, and then no one else has their needs. The way they do things are unique. So I do think they do like to buy products. Like WordPress VIP is proof of that. I think like it's a kind of productized version of WordPress as a publishing CMS, hosted. And I think that enterprise products is a really interesting topic that we didn't really cover that deeply last time. But like mostly what we're doing at the moment in the WordPress space is just like consulting for enterprise. Like build us this custom thing. They're not really buying a product. Some of them think they're buying WordPress, I guess, but that in practice all they're doing is paying us consulting fees. And I do wonder whether the future of that isn't that it's going to become more productized, so that, you know, whether there's like a WordPress for enterprise or a WordPress flavor for newsrooms that is a, you know, a collection of plugins and themes and hosting and WordPress and just your experience that's like packaged up and sold to them. And I'm sure that most of the money would still be made from you customizing that to each of the special needs. But I think enterprise do like to feel like they're actually purchasing something like that with like a feature list that they can see that, oh yeah, we want all those things. That makes us feel good.
Well, they have different requirements for various things too. Like here in the U.S., like SEC reporting requirements and things like that, accounting regulations that small businesses don't have to worry about. But I think you're exactly right in terms of kind of the services model on top of a base product. I spent 5 years in enterprise software before, you know, starting my WordPress career, and you know, all of the big players there are base packages, and then there are huge consulting budgets to customize those base packages. And you're right, it's exactly what we do with WordPress, where we say, here's a base feature set, here are the additional features you need, and here are how we're going to bridge that gap and give you a solution that hits all of those tick marks.
Is your experience similar, Miriam, with that?
Yeah, so what I see with our enterprise level clients in Israel, enterprise is much smaller than, let's say, in the States, but they're definitely different than the other types of businesses that we work with. Now that you're saying that, I'm thinking, okay, every single one of them wants the following: integration with Salesforce, marketing automation software, whether it's Marketo or one that keeps coming up is called Acton, things like that. Lead generation, they want us to advise them strategically. Downloading of white papers, adding them to mailing lists, you know, all that kind of stuff. Data, they want analytics, not just, you know, not just Google Analytics, something more robust. There's definitely a newsroom, investor relations. Like, as I'm thinking about, like, this is what they all want, and like you said, they all think they're unique. But it's like a shopping list of what enterprise level clients want on their site, and it probably could be productized. Interesting idea.
Because I feel like often our clients make the decision to go with us because, you know, they've read a case study that says we did Marketo before. And so they're like, oh, this company know how to do Marketo on WordPress, right? And so that, you know, or we've got a product, a Marketo WordPress product that we can sell.
Right.
And often that will be like you know, they're kind of coming from this weird angle, and we're like, well, we can build anything for you. I mean, yeah, sure, we did Marketo for these guys, but that's not like a special thing we sell.
Totally.
Yeah.
You know what's missing, though, that keeps coming up? Two-way communication between a site and Salesforce. That would be something that could be productized and reused, because clients need, you know, they have users here, they have users there. If their user level here changes, their client's access to the site needs to change, right? Their permission level, things like that. So that's something that's missing there.
Yeah, I think it's you know, a really interesting kind of discussion topic. The kind of how, in a moment, I think VIP is really the only enterprise product in the WordPress space.
But if you look at the sites that are there, aren't they mostly like, I don't know, like TechCrunch or like big publishers?
Yeah, they're publishing. I mean, it's a product aimed at like big publishing for sure.
Right, but like a business, it's not necessarily the right solution for them. They need a business site.
I think the Salesforce example there is a perfect example of the complexity, because, you know, Salesforce installations are often unrecognizable from each other. Like oh yeah, I know how to use Salesforce, and then you see another one, you're like, what is that? Right? Rules are also figured differently. Everything's set up differently. So it sounds simple to say, oh yeah, we'll just build something that has a two-way, you know, bridge between WordPress and Salesforce. Well, you know, where are you going to make the decisions about how things are configured?
Right.
That's the enterprise market.
Yeah, that's true.
Welcome back, Troy.
Yeah, it's nice to have you with us.
You know, that's a little embarrassing. I was halfway through a question and both screens just went black and the Mac just died. So anyway, I hope I didn't miss anything too riveting. But I'm back just in time to wrap up.
Nice.
Let me just you guys just keep talking amongst yourselves because I just want to check in with the chat widget before we wrap up.
That's always the point.
Somebody
Somebody can think of anything.
Somebody say something profound, please.
So Salesforce, it's a thing.
So yeah. To wrap that point up, I think that the solution there is that what enterprise think they're buying is a Salesforce product, but what you're really selling them is consulting to build whatever Salesforce product they actually want. But that's the distinction.
Right.
But if we could just keep that between ourselves, that would be great.
Yeah, private
Ourselves,
conversation.
YouTube.
Did anyone get Jave's comment about GovPress? Have I missed that?
Ooh.
No. Did not
So
see
Jave
that.
said in the chat widget, a GovPress type solution has been mentioned a lot around the place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that same thing. I would imagine that in reality, what that is a consulting company. But saying you've got GovPress probably puts you at the top of all the other consulting companies for government works.
Yeah.
I'm
The
sure-
question I was about to ask, and you may have answered this. You may have answered this while I died. But the question I was about to ask is, does anyone know if Automatic is making active moves into this space where they're setting up, enterprise kind of vertical solutions outside the restaurant space? Are they doing this kind of at scale for a whole bunch of other verticals? Do we know?
I mean, there are a load of other verticals other than restaurants, music and food and cities and councils. I don't know. There's lots. Yeah, I haven't seen much recently. They released most of them a long time ago. Haven't released any recently.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't have any inside knowledge on that.
Okay. Any parting final comments from anyone?
No.
Excellent. Well, hey, I want to thank you all very much for joining me again on WP Think Tank number 3. You should have figured out by now this is a quarterly event. We do it in the middle month of each quarter, so the next one will be in November. Will be the last one for this year. Again, thank you guys for joining me. I'm humbled and honoured that you choose to give up so much of your time to have this conversation. I think they're conversations worth having. Our audience seem to feel the same way, so hopefully we can do this again in 3 months' time. Check out everything you need to know at wpthinktank.com, and you can subscribe to the Think Tank list to get updates about when this is happening again. So, hey guys, all the best. I'm off to Thailand tomorrow for a 3-day mastermind group with our customers, which I'm looking forward to, and then I'm going to hang on the beach, read a book, drink beer, and get a suntan, which I can't wait for. So,
awesome.
Yeah. So, hey guys, thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one. Until then, happy pressing of words.
It's been a pleasure, guys. See you next time.
Thank you.